Hey, Chad, can you hear me now? Okay, I can't hear you, though. I don't know why.
Oh, gosh.
There,
okay.
now I got you. Now I got you.
All right, super. We're synced up.
Cool.
So great to have you guys. Thank you all for hanging out with Alex and I today. We're going to be talking about a topic that nobody really cares about, customer value.
Perfect.
It's not in the press. It's not talked about by analysts, and your customers aren't searching for it constantly, and you're not always held accountable to it. It is such a hot topic, and we're happy for everyone to be with us today. This is kind of our Voice of Value live show. And it's really going to be a conversation, very casual conversation. Alex and I would love to hear from folks in the chat about what you're thinking. You know, I'm so grateful for Alex. I don't know if you know this, buddy, but you were one of the founding members of the advisory ecosystem back in November of 2018. You were one of the first members.
Well, and what's so funny about that is you were and the team was so put together.
We didn't know what we were talking about.
I didn't know I was early. No, it was you framed out the opportunity and and what the advisory's pursuit was going to be really well. I figured it was old hat. So kudos to you and the team.
Well,
I'm really honored to be a part of it for all this time. Been really
we're so grateful that you're one of our charter members. Been with us for 2 years. The community is now, I think, 60 plus companies, 125 leaders as of today. It constantly is growing. So I think what I'm so excited about today is Alex has really been very participatory in all of our advisory sessions and has really co-led sessions and been a source of thought leadership. So I'm just happy to let the LinkedIn family see a little bit of what we get to see in the community from Alex and what he's doing. He is a thought leader around customer success. And so that's what we're going to talk about: customer value, sales, customer success, how these worlds are converging, how we need to scale our initiatives going forward. But that's all very serious. So before we get serious on all those topics, at Ecosystems, we have this concept at Eco we call the Eco Opener. And so for those in LinkedIn that know and meet with us all the time, we love to ask kind of a provocative question to kind of start more human first. And so I'm going to ask Alex, I'm riffing here a little bit, Alex, to give you time to think about this answer. But I also want the folks in LinkedIn in the chat, I'd love to hear what has changed. But here's my one caveat. I only have one caveat. Alex nor the folks in the chat can have any references to changing their mind on the Final Four picks for March Madness. So tell me, buddy, what is something that you have recently changed your mind about? I can get to know you a little bit.
So, and by the way, regarding March Madness, it wouldn't have been applied because I'm a Hoya, and while we made it, we didn't make. We made it to one, and I was so. I would say that the thing that I've really changed my mind about, and I doubt I'm alone here, is the effectiveness of building and maintaining and even strengthening relationships with customers and partners and coworkers in a digital world. And I had just joined Delphix really at the beginning of the pandemic. I think I've only met one person, and that person lives about 5 miles from me. We've had coffee a couple of times. Every other person, and I have within our organization is almost 150 people. I've met none of them, and yet I feel we've been really tight. And we riff. We've had fun. We've had fun virtual sessions. We've had serious virtual sessions, and I feel like I've gotten to know these people, and vice versa. And if you had asked me if that was really possible in the first few months of the pandemic, I would have probably not. I would have probably told you, no, you got to break bread. You got a handshake. You got to eye to eye. It's got to be, because I spent the last 25 years doing that.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to say I don't want to do that anymore. I'm very excited to get back out on the road. I'm very excited to meet with people in person. But my mind has been changed about the effectiveness of digital collaboration as a proxy.
Such a cool point. Do you think, I'm playing off of that a little bit. Do you think what you're experiencing could also dictate your hiring strategy going forward? The fact that this intimacy, you don't have to factor that in as a constraint.
Not only has it already influenced it, and I think that's pervasive throughout all the functions of our company and of other companies that I work with or colleagues I have at other companies. The part of the playbook's been thrown out, and it's where there might have been no, if it's a product management team, they all have to live within 10 miles of the headquarters because they could all get together. That's all been thrown out. The concept of my my CSMs or my RSMs have to be within 100 square miles of a particular city or territory. Even that's been relaxed a bit. And I think we've probably rotated a bit to the other side, especially as we look for territories we're opening up or leadership, that they have to be able to operate as self-starters that might not be in an office, that might not be shoulder to shoulder with their colleagues, right. And that management layers have to be able to manage completely virtual teams that might be in totally different areas with physical touch points that might only be a couple times a year.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. Well, let's change our focus a little bit. Let's talk about Delphix. I think you're coming up on your 1 year anniversary up in May, right?
Almost, yeah. They're about 10 months in or at this point, yeah.
So you come into Delphix as the Chief Customer Officer. Kind of baseline for us and the audience a little bit about the space that Delphix plays in and some of your baseline observations that you came in with.
Yeah, so Delphix is a company that's been around for probably concept 12 years ago, creation and sort of first hit the market about 10 years ago, started in test data management, getting production data very easily into the hands of testers for more effectively pushing code releases. At least that's where it started. And the really great thing about it is that because of all the engineering work that's happened in the last decade, it is now a solution which can treat and manage data the same way the rest of IT has been able to treat all the other components of IT. So you think about ephemerality, immutability, spinning up, spinning down infrastructure, what the public cloud has kind of ushered in. I want compute, I want memory, I want network, I want storage. I spin it up, I spin it down, I put it here, I put it there. Delphix can allow customers to do that with data and do it in seconds, anywhere in the world, get it to the right groups that are consumers. And that's probably the big differential between Delphix as a data company and other companies that have usually been focused on data protection, keeping a copy of it and storing it and putting in some archive. Delphix is highly focused on data consumers. And that group of data consumers, that audience, has exploded in the last 10 years. 10 years ago was a testing team that might have only been doing releases once a year. Those testing teams have exploded into UAT, SIT, pre-prod. But now you also have rehosting teams and replatforming teams. They need data. You've got AI and ML teams supporting data scientists. They need data. You've got DevOps teams that are testing their own data in their CI/CD pipelines. They need data, and they need data to do their daily jobs. And that's where that explosion of consumer, that audience of consumers, has really positioned Delphix in a very unique place.
So we've got this data explosion. Delphix is at kind of the epicenter. Alex comes in to kind of put forward a vision and a strategy around customer success. What do you find when you come in there? And what are some of your early observations on kind of struggling moments that you see the organization having?
Yeah, so there was a period of time in Delphix's history where, there was some tumult within the business itself, kind of how it was going to market, the messaging around, its value, and its value was very, very evident. I mean, Delphix has got some customers going back 6, 8, 10 years that are happy users, and they've really, they've renewed and they've expanded almost without, a function of customer success, and even with changing sales reps and account executives. But I would say that the struggle that was there, and probably continues to be there in a little bit, and then that's where we're going to talk a lot about that today. But at other companies too, if you are introducing something that's game changing, and you are introducing something that is bridging the gap between gaps that have persisted for decades, gaps we've all gotten used to, old ways of doing things that customers would look at and go, well, we've always done it that way. Why would I do it a different way? Delphix is, from a data perspective, is closing a lot of these gaps, but it's a journey. You have to bring customers on these journeys, and that's where the struggle was, where the company had landed. Those initial use cases, there was high value perceived, but it tended to be sort of in small groups, very data centric groups. And the fact is, so much work has gone into the platform over the years. Now it's applicable to groups that are external to all those audiences, right? Like how many AI ML data scientists work with the database team? How many developers, are engaging multiple times a day with, the data strategy team? These are different organizations, but they rely that one can curate, operate, and operationalize what the other needs to consume. And so those are the gaps we're closing. And it's exciting when you see the light bulb go off for customers going, wait a minute, you can do that? No one's ever doing that. And it's one of my favorite expressions from the force management training we took years ago at my time at Turbo. Who's doing this? And the answer is nobody.
Nobody's doing this. Yeah, that's why. So I love it. And when you think about, because it sounds like, if I listen correctly, Alex, that's a bit of an amorphous use case, because users and constituents and benefactors of this are constantly morphing. How do you get your arms around the solution and the use case and the value when it is so amorphous?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good segue into some of the slides we can go through today, if that works for you. So I have what I'll share here is one thing. I'm not here to train people or educate people necessarily on Delphix, and hopefully you can see my slide at the moment here.
Yeah.
So the purpose of showing this slide is just that there are a lot of different areas, and I don't think other technology companies are dissimilar here. So many companies out there have acquired other companies, they've built other capabilities. All of us are leveraging the fact that so much work has been done in automation and workflow over the last 5 to 10 years, that there's all these new paradigms and easy ways to do things. It's been like the automation focus combined with the API focus of a lot of new tech. And so you can do a lot of interesting things. This is just to show you that, I mean, across everything from optimization to compliance to integration, and then on-prem and public cloud, there are so many use cases and value points that we can bring to our customers. But if I really had to layer across where these use cases, these PBOs resonate, they would not often be in the exact same line of business or business unit or function. And that inherently becomes the challenge, right? That's the opportunity. If you're working in a company and your tech, your method, your way, your service is trying to close gaps and show people to do things differently, and you're really trying to bring traditionally disparate functions together, you really need a rigor and a heuristic to follow. And that's really what we have here. And it's kind of been that at a couple of other places as well that I've been fortunate enough to work. So what we've done is and I'll try to keep it simple here. Much like customers have made so many investments in technology, their technology ecosystems for different groups like AI, ML, and site reliability engineering, and DevOps, and CI/CD. A lot of vendors have made big investments in technology too. The most prolific one, probably across the board, is Salesforce, right? So if you're looking at it from a go-to-market strategy, Salesforce is where, or any other CRM, but Salesforce is pretty dominant, where we're doing a lot of capture. We're capturing, usually in the form of opportunities. We're trying to capture information. If you look at it from a MEDDIC perspective in pre-sales, you're trying to capture as much as you can about the customer and then the opportunity in order to not waste time and to get to a deal as quickly as possible. So Salesforce is a great capturing tool and capturing platform. If from the customer success world, I've been using Gainsight pretty much almost for a decade. I mean, I think Nick Maida would probably tell you I was probably one of the earlier adopters of Gainsight as well. And this has become an excellent platform for actioning. I'd say tracking and actioning. So the calls to action, things like that we'll talk about in a second, just make it a little bit more simple to inspect and to create senses of urgency and clear tasks and playbooks for your CSMs. But I would say even more broadly than that too, executives as well as RSMs. But the final piece was this demonstration, right? And this is where, as simple as it is, it's something that I think has not been paid as much attention to as the capture and as the actioning. And the reason why, at least in my worlds, that this has been really important is because if I'm trying to bridge the gap and I'm trying to close a gap that's existed for decades, and I'm trying to change and influence behavior, if I'm expecting our organizations to be agents of change, you can't be an agent of change without really, really powerful demonstration. And so, when you first introduced me to the ecosystem platform, the two things I noticed about it were, one, the ease of use. It was actually really easy to be able to set something up, to be able to bring in libraries of objectives, and then to be able to very easily set goals and metrics against them. But the other thing was it was simple, it was clean. It was something I could essentially bring to a senior director level if I'm managing an onboarding and I want to give an update as a CSM, but it's also something that I can bring to an executive level. So I saw a little bit of versatility there that made it really, really scalable from a demonstration perspective. Make sense?
It does. And I wonder, it makes such a good point, Alex, about, because all of our folks in this community and in the LinkedIn family, in essence, we're all selling change, right? We're all asking somebody to go from some status quo to a new state. And I think your point has a real profound impact of, we can capture, we can action, but if we're not showing that demonstration, if we're not giving the legitimate proof points and early wins and success, documented success, that change argument becomes tougher and tougher. So if we really start to hone in on demonstrate, we're going to be able to chip away at the status quo bias, right?
That's right. And in that, there's an altitude discussion as well, because the change, the value that you want to claim credit for and articulate at one level might be different at another level. At one level, you might be operating in use cases and metrics that are very, that an executive would consider tactical, but for that level, of user, it might be very important. But you have to be able to tie that back to the executive level, and that's the whole concept of PBOs and MEDDIC and that kind of thing, where we have seen success and where is essentially taking many concepts of MEDDIC and instantiating them in the post-sales world. Because
take a moment, Alex, on MEDDIC for those that might not know that acronym.
Yeah, so MEDDIC is a sales framework for qualification of deals and essentially being able to make sure that all the different components that are necessary for a deal to be successfully identified, managed through, sponsored, and won. So you're aware of champions, you're aware of your competition, and it
Right.
stands. If I get it right, so MEDIC is metrics, executive buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identified pain, champions, and competition.
Yep. Nicely done.
Thanks. We and just for anybody who's a channel company out there, at one of my former companies, we added another C for channel if you sell through the channel. So identification of partner was key.
Yep.
And off of that, and Chad, you've seen a version of this before. It's a heuristic I've been using at a few different companies. Yeah. But what we found was there were, if I'm walking into a new company, or if I'm even like an RSM or a CSM walking into an existing account, where we found is that there was where there was an initial deal done where MEDIC or target account selling or solution selling, any one of those methodologies. I just happen to really like MEDIC, and MEDIC's pretty well established. Where that's been done, that sort of initial deal, if you get kind of close to the epicenter when it was done, you've got good control over making sure this momentum path to value. But let's look at really what's happened in the last several years. Not every company is a SaaS company, or not every company that is currently a SaaS company was always a SaaS company. So many companies, and probably the most famous one was Adobe, right? They went through in the public landscape, going from perpetual to subscription and SaaS. And there are literally thousands of companies going through that transition in some form or another now. Some of them still have legacy perpetual models and now shifted to subscription models, and then probably have some kind of a SaaS aspiration or SaaS go-to-market that's in place. In the midst of that, you're going to have customers that you worked with. Yeah, sure, maybe you landed a few new logos in the last few months. Probably going to be less concerned about the long-term viability of those customers because you're now focused on onboarding and adoption. But what about the customers that closed with you 2 years ago or 3 years ago? And so the heuristic that we put in place, I won't read through these in excruciating detail, but what we've essentially done is taken the concept of some of the concepts of MEDIC and some of the concepts of CS, right? Some of the playbooks you might see in a Gainsight, and brought them together along with demonstration points. And there, for us, it's very quickly positive business outcomes, executive buyer. You want to make sure that that's not just when the deal closes, but is part of the ongoing inspection of an account. Right. Partner identification, if you're a channel company, the sticky automations and integration that if you can achieve them, you're less likely to be ripped out or replaced. CSM touch points, whatever frequency you've set up for your level of account, tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3s. The inclusion of onboarding and advisory services, which if you are trying to sell change, are more often required than not, whether you're doing it yourself or you're expecting a partner to fulfill them. The change messaging that continues to come from product management and engineering as you garner large customers and mid-sized customers on the futures of your product and allow them to feel like they're influeing and gain their feedback on where you're prioritizing your dollars. The training of your users within your customer base. I'm going to spend 60 seconds on this. We call it the biweekly executive buyer note or letter. Sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's biweekly. But this is one of those altitude examples where I can take the progress that a team is making within the trenches of implementing technology and then doing product statuses and project statuses, and that's a fine communication for that altitude. But the executive buyer is he or she is the one that wrote a check, likely against some kind of ROI, which was established in the beginning of the sales cycle. It is incumbent upon our organization to message back at that altitude to that executive buyer in a concise executive format where we are relative to that investment. Now, there's 3 dimensions to that communication. The first thing is our progress made to date. So what have we been able to accomplish relative to the investment that you've made? There might have been 2 or 3 key areas, either they're positive business outcomes or use cases tied to positive business outcomes. And I'm still waiting to hear if there's any more than 3 PBOs. PBOs are either I'm making you more money, I'm saving you some money, or I'm mitigating risk. Almost everything kind of falls into those kind of 3, but customers will have different initiative names for it. So we try to tie it to initiatives.
Right.
So the first thing is, where are we at relative to that investment? The second thing is, we're calling out champions. So in the course of kind of penetrating the account, establishing credibility within the account, and delivering value, we are calling out champions by name to the executive buyer. Laura did an outstanding job on this part of the project. It was supposed to take 2 weeks. She did it in 48 hours. Because of that, we were able to deliver on initiative 2's value 5 times faster, 3 times faster, whatever it might be. So we call out our champions. And the third thing we do is we ask for help. This is where, if we're running into stopping points, blocking points, oh, well, we never done it that way, or, sort of the inertia you're going to inherently run into in some, especially kind of tier 1, tier 2 accounts.
Right.
This is where you go back without flaming people. You ask that EB for support in delivering against the ROI that he or she signed off on. So the other ones here are pretty straightforward. Executive briefings being scheduled. We're very, very hyper focused there. Expansion opportunities in Salesforce.com. If you are actually trying to establish a cadence for, if you're looking at your sales team and say, I close a deal here, how much faster am I going to get to my expansion deal or my secondary deal? If you're hyper focused on customer acquisition costs and you're trying to get to a secondary opportunity within the same 12 months, most people measure CAC by 12 months, and you can drive your CAC down quite a bit if you're expanding within that account. This is an important metric to measure, and it's something that we measure. We've measured at every company I've been at for the last decade. Champions I called out, and then of course the support and ER status, which is a common CSM customer health score element. And what we've done is we've taken these elements here, and we're updating the health heuristic. So if we're looking at an account and we are saying, oh, everything's going great, the implementation's going great, they're using our product, but let's say we don't know what the PBOs are and we don't have an executive buyer anymore, that account immediately goes yellow, even if everything else is going great.
Yeah, the higher weighted of that attribute there.
Yeah.
Alex, I've seen you presented this to the advisory ecosystem. I think it's great thought leadership because it's taking some of these concepts that have traditionally been, I'm going to say, more tribal and qualitative. Yes. Hey, we're doing well, or I think, there's high adoption, and it's being a little bit more systematic in terms of looking at various different vectors, in this case, 12 different vectors, and trying to get a framework around how we look at health and, frankly, how we're positioned for expansion, I would imagine, right? If folks are strong here, they're more apt to have an expansion conversation.
That's right. So this is informed the way that we either treat new accounts going forward, but it also becomes an excellent checklist for us to orient ourselves in accounts where we've had champions disappear. We've had organizational structure change on our customer side. We've lost economic buyers, things like that, where if you really want to get a sense of how at risk you are in an account, those are the ones that keep me up at night. And they, quite frankly, until you hit a flywheel effect for your company, every company grows, it has its bedrock of foundation of revenue coming from its install base. Different companies will hit different trajectories of new logo flywheels over the course of time. Some companies just explode and they're getting hundreds and hundreds of new logos a quarter. Some of them, it takes time to get there. So the bedrock of foundation of the value of the company is in the install base, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, but that's another really important shift. As subscription becomes the way, you essentially have the CS organization overseeing, protecting, and in many cases expanding on that bedrock of value for the company, which sometimes becomes more valuable than even the new logos that are coming in.
So we've got Salesforce, we've got Gainsight, we've got ecosystems, and you've brought these worlds into one integrated flow. Talk to us about how you've operationalized that. How does that show up each day for the workflow?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if everybody's using Salesforce Lightning, they're likely familiar with the fact that you can manipulate these interfaces pretty drastically. There are some canned MEDDIC interfaces. So you can actually, where I want to have Medic as that sales framework that I'm using within Salesforce, it can give, inherent drop downs, which are all customizable about PBOs and metrics to measure by and decision criteria and all that kind of stuff. So in Salesforce itself, and I've redacted some of the customer information, this is actual customer information. This is where we are capturing the experience and the priorities that are happening in the pre-sales process. I happen to be responsible for the pre-sales organization at Delphix, and it was actually the same for my previous 3 companies. And it's, I'll tell you, in the subscription world, bringing those 2 functions together, which were traditionally not together, right? Usually
Right.
SEs roll into the sales team. It has drastically helped us improve the taxonomy of what's being demonstrated versus what has to be delivered, and really get it to the point where there's no light in between, where the nomenclature is the same, the use case is the same. We can start pick listing from this kind of PBO has these kind of value elements, where DR or data protection or DevOps or application acceleration. So we use Salesforce as that capture point after we've put some work into the taxonomy of what are the things our product can do and how do we categorize that. There's financial benefit to that as well, and market data benefit, because if we can capture what opportunities look like, we can start to trend how much business we have coming in or how much business we might be losing, either on close loss opportunities or churn accounts, based on what customers are doing and then how we're building the product and how we're messaging. So this is that starting point of sort of capture. The next element is Gainsight. Again, I've redacted a bunch of customer information here, but Gainsight has been for us at Delphix an excellent actioning tool, a notification and an actioning tool. It obviously comes with standard playbooks, which are great. We've been able to create some of our own, but within the framework of all the things that you need to make sure are happening, it's very good. It can send out those CTAs, those calls to action. It can track things on timeline, so the sending out of certain communications. We can track and see when a CSM had touch points and what kind of touch point that was. So between the tracking and then the actioning, or the tracking, and if there's no action, the warning that an action was required, it's really a great platform for doing that. And it's especially powerful if you've informed it or educated it with the taxonomy of use cases and value propositions that really all start back in pre-sales.
Yeah.
And then the final piece, which has really always been missing, right? It's either been a conversation or a PowerPoint deck that in many cases had to get manually created. Gainsight does have some capabilities around creating PowerPoint decks or exporting components. This demonstration element is where I saw the ecosystems platform just stand out, right? It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't, right? So it was expecting the customers to, the vendors to have the taxonomy of value and use cases and PBOs, which we do. So those libraries can be imported. If the vendor's done the work to make sure that that's also available in Salesforce when we're working on an opportunity, now you're locked in from essentially capture through to your customer success automation tool, through to your demonstration platform. And the nice thing about the nice thing about the ecosystems platform is like I said earlier, the ability for it to kind of stretch altitudes. So I can take this and I can drill into things at a project level, a project team level, or even an individual functional level, or I can roll it up and literally give an executive buyer where we are relative to the key initiatives that he or she invested in us for. And that's something that has been we've piloted this. We piloted it at my previous company and it went well. We piloted it for the last several months at Delphix, and we had customers really come through the screen in a positive way, saying like, "This is excellent. Can I get a copy of this?" And we're like, "Actually, you can even log in."
Right. Right.
And if we got something wrong, let us know. But it's a great way to be succinct, meaningful, value driven, and not be not try to write the Gettysburg Address over and over and over again. And what I always say, especially when dealing with executive buyers and the team supporting the executive buyers, you want to be very, very relevant. You want to tie to what they made the investment for. You want to be top of the fold as much as you possibly can. For those of you familiar with email marketing, and you want to be relevant. And this helped us get there far more systematically, far more quickly.
And Alex, take a moment on this, because it is something that you've always been very progressive in the concept of value and how we discuss it. And you alluded to a point that I'd love you to talk a little bit more about, is the concept of inviting the customer into the value conversation, as opposed to this being something that we push a button and some calculator and then generate a report and try to convince them on value. Really making this a workspace where the end customer can challenge an assumption, take a value driver, uncheck a value driver. That co-creation aspect you've always been very strong on from the beginning. Tell us about why and what evidence you're seeing on how that impacts a conversation.
Yeah, so we all will run into situations where whatever scope we sold against in the pre-sales dynamic, sometimes that scope will shift. Sometimes we hear things like scope creep and maybe it gets bigger. Okay, I welcome that problem. That's okay. But other times you have initiatives that are deprioritized or canceled, or like I mentioned earlier, there might be organizational shifts and changes, personnel changes, so priorities change. And to be able to sort of be audible ready for when those kind of things happen, and be able to capitalize on an ongoing dialogue around changing a priority, changing a key metric, changing a key value, instead of hearing that something got delayed or canceled, and then sitting back and waiting for the customer to be advising on a different direction of some kind. This makes it a meaningful, bi-directional, live engagement versus trying to go over email, trying to tack it into a talk track at a quarterly CSM checkpoint. It has been, for us, it's been a way for us to, in some cases, get ahead of where those changes are coming. So if we're looking at the same sheet of music with the customer and they go, oh, you know what, that particular rollout, that might not happen that quarter or that date, because that whole program just got pushed to the end of the next fiscal year.
There's like an account intelligence aspect to it,
totally,
right?
Yeah, it's a chance for us to capture all of that stuff in real time. And yeah.
Do you also, Alex, think there's an element to enabling the Delphix champion to have the inevitable conversation she or he will have when you're not in the room? That the fact that they have this ability to now convey the value story around Delphix, independent of being with you guys?
Yeah, so it's interesting. While we are tracking on our side, if you remember from the heuristic, the expansion opportunity, is there an expansion opportunity in the account within the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? But the other element that we're able to do here is actually show where the next logical expansion opportunities are. And what we're doing, in addition to looking at the CSMs and training them on concepts of MEDDIC, not so they can create opportunities in Salesforce, but they're aware of how deals and value are prioritized and weighted with a customer. The other thing we're doing is taking that library of use cases that are most commonly associated with expansions of certain landing points, and educating them on how to talk to it, but able to show it here. So this becomes a way that we're claiming credit, as I mentioned earlier in the executive buyer letter, we're claiming credit for what we've done. Hey, we're 36 million into the operational savings. We've increased application development, saved you $12.1 million because you're pushing out more instances. This is a chance for us to then guide on what's the next logical place, and for us to go. Sometimes you can do it overtly and say, hey, look, so we should be talking about this. Or sometimes you're a little covert. You can put it out there. Customer might say, why do we have outage recovery there in terms of RTO? And we'll say, oh, well, that's most customers of ours end up heading to reducing their RTO once they've deployed Delphix in such a way. And it becomes an overt discussion around expansion In some cases, expansion. Some cases, it's just additional value that you can deliver with the install that you've delivered already.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's almost like if we get credit for the past value delivered, we've earned the right to have that expansion conversation. And this is the platform that can allow that to happen more organically than feel as if it's being pushed. There's a comment. Let me read this. So audience comment, when not in the room is where scale acceleration happens. Yeah, really good point. So the chat being, that's where we can get that scale when we're not in the room, and we've kind of empowered that, I'll call that the Delphix mobilizer, that champion, to be able to convey to the other 5 or 6 other stakeholders, hey, here's where we are with the implementation, or here's the operational savings. And for the check we wrote, this is what we got for it, right?
Yeah. So when our champions are activated on the demonstration platform, they can log in when they need to, show their progress to their leadership. And in some cases, we've had executive briefings where the executive who joined the call from the customer side, and we use this as one of the template components of our executive briefings. He or she will say, "Oh, I've seen this before. Oh, is this you guys?" and the answer, yes, it's us guys. Don't think I got that grammatically correct, but the opportunity is for the champions to be showing in a clean, succinct way, where they're spending their time, where they are relative to the initiatives and the charters they've been chartered to go deliver against, and they can kind of roll up from their level to their next level, or the executive buyer, where things are relative to the investment made. And it also empowers them a little bit when we go ask for help, and they're on the communication. They can support us in our request for help, saying, yeah, we're making good progress, but we do have a couple of blockers here. And as you can see on that on the collaboration platform, we've made really good financial progress, and we're kind of held up here. So it does help when we're out of the room. Yes, there's the expansion and there's that kind of acceleration. I love it when we can get through blockers, especially if we're really trying to teach people how to do something that's just not been the way before.
Right. And like you said, kind of an old mindset and to a disruptive problem that they have to be educated on and alerted to.
Yep.
You've always been progressive, and the audience has seen that just in the heuristics that you've put together. I love this concept that for all the years you and I have talked, the concept of making our customer champion a rock star.
Yeah.
Recognizing them to the executive level, helping them go through some headwinds when we have to. And this is just an extension of that, making sure that our Delphix customer at the end of the day is seen as an expert internally on the value that's being delivered within the organization, and making them kind of an agent for change and a value broker, if you will, between you and the company.
Yeah. And extending their resume too.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the personal value drivers. So I love this capture, action, demonstrate. What I love about it too is you were very kind on the simplicity of the ecosystems platform and UI. I love the simplicity of the strategy. It's just very clean. Capture in Salesforce, action in Gainsight, demonstrate and co-create in ecosystems, and create that end-to-end process.
Yep.
What would you say, Alex, before we pivot to kind of the future? Because I'd love our audience to get a sense of where you see stuff going. Is there any anecdotes on some either quality of conversation changes that you're seeing with this CAD now in place, or what are some early indicators of success that you're pointing to around this new integrated approach? Yeah,
so I will get that's actually a really good lead in for some of the things that, and I don't think I'm alone here. I think a number of us are seeing it, but it's kind of it's the CS organization, the new kind of sales and renewal models that are rising to the world and the challenge of the subscription economy. What I wanted to show here was, if you're just taking those the three platforms together, what we've done is taken the elements of the heuristic and applied them into each one of these solutions, right? And in a way created there's a flow. It goes from Salesforce and Gainsight and Eco, and there's sort of mini flows that happen between each one. And for the sake of altitude, I didn't want to necessarily rat hole on all the back and forth between the exact systems. But there's a lot of work that goes behind each element of each pieces of the heuristic that we showed earlier. It's a lot of work, and most of the stuff starts manually. What we found is that each one of these platforms here plays a very, very strong role in systematizing and automating the things that we hold dear, the elements of the heuristic that we hold dear. And but we found it to be a really nice combination of aligning the go-to-market with an initial go-to-market of a new logo, the inspection and the onset or setting the stage for delivery of value, the proving of that value, the asking for help when we don't get that value, and then opens up the opportunity. To your point earlier, you earn the credibility to go ask for the next opportunity. It's shaking out to be a nice balance, and I've yet to find something that we care about, that we know we need to have for new logos, as well as existing logos that need to be, I use another term, but probably when I'm not on LinkedIn Live, but unscrewed. We need to really fix where we're at. We need to reorient ourselves in an account. We need to open up another set of users and executives' eyes to what we can do and what we can provide relative to what they invested in. But it's not a bad segue to kind of, what we're seeing emerging here.
Yep.
And I'll start with mottos, because there are 3 mottos that I live by, professionally mostly, but even personally too. Within the customer success world, I think the customer success quote that this captures everything, coming from the kitchen sink land that it used to be, and now I think the teams like at Gainsight and the CS community overall has been far more focused on the roles and responsibilities of the members and the functions within CS. But it's not your fault, it's just your problem. I mean, my first few years that I got labeled as somebody in CS, I felt like that was what it was. It was, if anything at all happened with the customer at all,
it came over to CS.
That's a customer success thing, because that's a customer. And I'm like, you put like a SolarWinds bug in the code. Like that's really, so it's not my fault. It's just my problem. Right. So, the second thing, particularly with the importance of subscription and the choice that's out there. I think you were mentioning it on it was either TSIA call, the webinar not too long ago. Choice is everywhere. And, barriers to entry used to be just huge, and now they're not. And so if you are not actively expanding, especially if you are trying to close gaps that have existed in behavior and between functions and lines of business for decades, if you're not actively expanding, you are most likely dying. It could be a slow, death by 1,000 paper cuts, but just really make no mistake, right? And when we get a flat renewal, and I don't care where I've worked, we get a flat renewal, and I'm kind of like, really? Flat renewal? Like, seriously? But the other thing is this, and I have to give credit to really the CS community in general, in terms of the focus on roles and responsibilities. And that's another reason why the heuristic was something that we started to put into play and put into action. I found that in many ways, we were often in the early days, we were throwing bodies at problems, and everybody, right? And I even worked at a place where the directive was to just swarm an account with so many bodies at so many different levels, because that would ensure the renewal. And what we found is that if everybody does everything, nobody does anything. Because the moment somebody runs into a real challenge where they got to have a serious conversation with a customer, or they got to give bad news, or they have to bring groups together that it would be an unnatural act, they go, you know what? I bet Mike will do it. Mike's working on the account too. And then Mike will run into it. I bet Laura will do it. Laura's here too. Like, she'll figure it out. And if everybody does everything, nobody does anything. So that the charter and the responsibilities have to be really, really clean. In terms of the value trends, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but pre-sales, kind of as we've known it for 30 years, is definitely dead. And I think Yeah, I've heard a few people say it. I think David Sakamoto he mentioned it. I think one of the last advisory sessions, and I'm not sure if you heard it from somewhere else. I always kind of give credit where credit's due. I do it for the first 6 times. That 7th time I take credit for myself. But it's true. And bringing those worlds together of the delivery of value, the kickoff, the delivery, the ownership, and the inspection of value delivered right back into the next pre-sales cycle. It's we almost find that motion needs to be taught and embraced. And I find that where the CS organizations and the pre-sales organizations are inherently in the same organization and they work shoulder to shoulder, they're much more highly effective at doing that. I've also found with customers, they like the concept of whoever was committing something to me is part of the same team at some level that is delivering it to me. Mm-hmm. And we pointed out, we said we drive accountability from pre to post by bringing those groups together. There's no concept of let me sell you a bag of what and throw it over the wall and wish you luck.
Alex, just on that point, do you also see it happening where a lot of folks in the advisory ecosystem are talking about bringing CS in late stage sales activities, where that continuity is, whereas before we thought of it as kind of almost like a relay race. Well, wait till the baton's over in the PO and then we'll bring in CS. But now we're seeing this trend where CS is actually very immersed in late stage discussions around the opportunity and the value and the handoffs. Is that crossing your world as well?
It is. And in the established accounts, obviously they've already been establishing themselves. Right. So they're part of that sort of secondary, tertiary deal cycle. But yeah, especially in more complex deals, and also if you've got a strong CS organization that's going to be very, very business centric, PBO centric, but yet use case aware and technically savvy, you want to showcase those people as soon as possible within the sales cycle to amplify your brand. Wouldn't you like to work with us? Wouldn't you like to work with her? Wouldn't you like to work with this organization? And it also gives what I'll call a seasoned CSM an opportunity to share his or her value, his or her experience with customers, just like that particular customer, just like that prospect, and that express the excitement, express the sort of the framework we're going to work through. And I don't know if these are connected, but more and more customers out there, like our customers in the financial services community, our customers in the healthcare community, in the insurance community, they themselves are now starting to build customer 360s for their biggest customers around the world. And I'm seeing it very acutely because of the data opportunity. They want to pull right. CRM data and combine it with other data, like, how many times they've said things in forums, or have they opened up cases and that kind of thing. And I'm sitting there going, am I having a customer success automation discussion with my financial services company? But it's true. There is an increasing trend in the creation of customer 360s, and I would say the extolling of the values of customer success within companies that you wouldn't necessarily have associated with customer success, right? Up to that point, you think about customer experience, kind of big banks doing B2C stuff, but they're really trying to take some of the same actions that we as technology vendors have been taking with our customers for the last several years. The other thing is that as the CS organizations are overseeing and becoming more and more responsible for that bedrock of value, especially if you need to get 70 to 80% of your number out of your install base. What we've started to notice, we started to track and attribute the pipeline coming from the CS organization. And what we found is that it's converting anywhere from 400% to like 900% more effectively. So, if we might get 10% conversions from SDRs and cold calling, things like that, we're seeing 30, 40, 50+% conversion rates of pipeline to deals coming from the CS community. Now, that might sound kind of normal. It's like, well, of course, it's an expansion deal, but we're starting to measure it and track it as a goal and an OKR. And if the CS team has been doing the right thing by the customer, if we've got the ratios right, then that can become one of the cheapest and most highly effective, essentially pipeline generating capabilities within the company. And that goes to the last point, which is the shift, the shift from the indoor cat to the alley cat. I should probably clarify that.
I love that. When I read that, I was wondering, where is he going with that?
Yeah. So I am an alley cat. I am by definition, by passion, by my operating model, I'm an alley cat. I'm an outdoor cat.
Right.
I prefer to be out there, with customers, listening, I have no problem being at every single executive briefing. I have no problem. I would never ask anybody in any one of my organizations to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And I believe in that kind of leading from the front. And you kind of have to, especially if you're delivering something game changing, and you really need to be audible ready all the time. So the CS personnel that can evolve to have at least, maybe one paw be an alley cat paw, one paw be an indoor cat paw is really critically important. Sometimes there is a propensity that I've seen for the CS teams to become a little over operational and spend a lot more time in playbooks and a lot more time in methods and connections and instrumentations of systems internally. That's critically important. But if you don't have the external lens to inform how you should be instrumented and what you should be tracking and the ability to change when things change, then you tend to sort of get lost in the operational rigor and not have it influenced enough by the outdoor rigor or the rigor. Love it. And then the final thing is the sort of predictions. I don't think any of these are exclusively mine, but we're definitely seeing a trend. I'm seeing a trend. Fellow CCOs that I know are seeing a trend in the amount of responsibility and the type of responsibility falling under a CCO is looking more and more and more like a CC, like a traditional COO.
Right.
Every day. And some CCOs have actually been able to sort of shift their careers to keep customer success, keep that bedrock of value that the company depends on. And if they have really, really good sales DNA and good sales operations DNA, parlay that into a CRO role. There are a few members of the advisory that did that. They were CCOs and then became CROs, and maintained their CCO responsibility. Yep. But the importance of that bedrock of money, of cash, of value, that is really what a company is based on. That most of that tends to be under the responsibility of a CCO nowadays, and especially renewal is a big part of that. Expansion is a big part of that. NRR, the ability to increase ACV, the ability to facilitate and accelerate secondary and tertiary deals. More and more, this is really continuing to fall, at least some of the underpinnings, onto the shoulders of CCOs, which again, I think there's a trend there, and I'm not the only person that's seeing it or saying it. The second one here, the concept of in the spirit of becoming a little bit more of an outdoor cat or balancing that outdoor indoor cat, the training of customer success on sales principles, not so that they can become the sharks and they can go try to sell to customers, not because we want them going into Salesforce and creating opportunities and moving things across different stages of pipeline. That's not it. What we want them to be aware of are the concepts of really value. How do we get to the point where we understand what is valuable to a customer? The framework to do that in the pre-sales process is something like MEDDIC. And if we can maintain those components and inspect for those components in the post-sales world, it will help facilitate a more effective and likely more positive renewal or expansion or both. And the third piece, the rise of unstructured data, I'm on a personal quest right now with some of the members of Delphix across product engineering, customer success, services, to pull the power of unstructured data in order to help influence direction, in order to give us a much better picture of voice of the customer. And I'm sure there are a lot of ways that people are attacking this in a very sophisticated way. The days of, are there enough opportunities open in Salesforce to justify doing a certain capability or feature, or pulling that up or pulling that into the roadmap? If something didn't make its way into Salesforce, if something never made its way into an opportunity, if it was never a closed lost, all of that data is lost, right? And the ability to take community data, forum data, support case data, Salesforce and sales engagement data, email responses, to be able to aggregate all of that, and out of that unstructured data, combine what the prospect and customer universe looks like for a need, or a reason for churn, or a value that they hold, that they're actively pursuing, but maybe never translated into an opportunity. This is gold. And I think it's probably most gold for the CS and product teams. I think that's where there's a frontier there. Nick and the Gainsight team have put out lots of great content about how do you close that gap between the customer and the product and the roadmap and the strategy. There's a there. There's a huge opportunity there to make that better.
There is such gold in this session. I mean, tons of insights. We're actually at the top of the hour. And, when I came to ask Alex to do this, one of my objectives was I wanted the LinkedIn community to experience what I get to experience with him on our advisory, just as thought leadership. And so, guys, this is what we do at the advisory ecosystem. We have thought leaders like Alex do this and think through these models. And I think when I kind of summarize today, you've got the health heuristic, which is a really interesting way to think about risk and account health. You've got this concept that Alex is doing with caption and action and demonstrate, kind of the new form of a CAD, which is really powerful. And then how he's architected Salesforce and Gainsight and ecosystems into this integrated approach. Delphix's customer experience is just switched on. It is at a level that others need to kind of get curious on. So, buddy, I'm so grateful that we had the session and you were able to kind of reveal some of the thoughts and ideas and actually production things that you're going out to market with. And for the community, I'll let you know that if anybody is interested in the advisory, it's invitation only. We'd love to talk with you about it, but feel free to contact Kasha or Ecosystems. We'll put some information in the links for you guys below, or actually we have it right here on how to get in touch with Kasha, which is the email address there for interest in this thought leadership group and sessions. We're going to continue to do these Voice of Value lives. And buddy, what a complete hour of power that we just went through. I'm so grateful for your insights and going through the model.
It was my pleasure. I love these. I love these sessions. I definitely appreciate all the insight that I get personally and professionally from the ecosystem advisory. And look, I've been super fortunate. The team at Delphix has been incredible. This is a huge team effort, and so much of the underpinnings of success were put in place by the people that have been standing by Delphix customers for years. What we're talking about is just creating an operational framework for a lot of the things that they saw working for years, and now we're just trying to do it for scale.
Well put, my friend. All right, everybody, we wish you a great day. Thank you for joining and hanging out with us, and be on the lookout for more sessions. Take care, all.
Thank you.